Okay, our boy, who's no longer our boy.
Spike in anti-Semitism we're experiencing right now in America began after the worst instance of violence committed against Jewish people since the Holocaust.
Back in 2023, New York Senator Chuck Schumer made a passionate and personal speech from the Senate floor condemning anti-Semitism, and that is the topic of his new book called Anti-Semitism in America, A Warning. In it, he writes, the rise of anti-Semitism is a, quote, five-alarm fire that threatens American democracy. And Senator Schumer joins us now. Senator, thank you very much for being here.
Great to be with you all.
Wouldn't want to be looking out your window when I woke up this morning, right? You've got protesters out there. It's been a difficult few days. We're going to get to that. We're also going to get to the book. But I want to talk about what's going on in the Middle East, because overnight, the ceasefire that had held and that you had celebrated between Israel and Hamas has been broken.
Right.
Your reaction to that, and do you think a ceasefire could get back on the table?
Yes.
Could it be reestablished?
They were really close. And this ceasefire, the second round of the ceasefire is important because first it says Hamas, which I believe has been a large cause of the trouble, would disarm and Israel would remove its soldiers from Gaza. So they were close. It fell apart. I don't know the exact details. It happened overnight. But I think our government has to work really hard to bring them back to the table and get those hostages home.
Wow.
And I think it's possible because they were close at one point.
Now, last week, you and 9 other Democrats helped avert a government shutdown by voting for a Republican-written bill, which many Democrats have been angered by. And we've seen it described as a civil war, as a train wreck. Many Democrats believe, you know, if you have a government shutdown, that will force President Trump and Republicans to the negotiating table. Why not use your vote to push back and fight?
Because the idea that they would go to the negotiating table is they don't do it. This is a new group. This is not the old group. Let me explain. I knew when I took this vote, there'd be a lot of protests, but I felt I had to do it for the future, not only of the Democratic Party, but the country. Because here's as bad as that CR bill was, and it was bad, a shutdown is 10 times worse. Let me give you what happens.
Been blamed on the Democrats.
And you're right, Gail. But can I just explain why?
I just don't think, and I haven't been shown anything to the contrary, I just don't think that's true. I think typically the ruling party is the one that gets blamed for shutdowns. So I don't know where this understanding that Dems would have been blamed for it comes from. I don't think that happened under Trump. I think Trump was blamed for that shutdown when it happened under the Republicans there. I don't know where this idea that the Dems would have taken heat for this comes from, unless I'm missing something or there's some polling data or something I'm just not aware of.
You've been saying you were not going to vote. I think people were upset with you, and people are very upset with you because you had led people to believe that, no, I'm going to vote against
Okay,
it.
well, let me explain why first a shutdown is terrible. People ought to know that. The executive branch, in this case, Musk, Doge, and this horrible guy Vogt, who have no concern for working people, would have had sole power to determine what opens and what closes. They determine what is essential. You can't...
Like, it sucks, and the politicians can't say this publicly. Oh, God. Oh, God. His explanation here actually makes me hate him even fucking more. Oh, no. This would have been the best thing that could have happened, is if they would have made decisions that would have hurt a lot of American people. You can't keep staving off the pain of the Republican presidency. If they want to take actions that will hurt the people. Also, my God, what a way to blame conservatives. You're saying that you have a government shutdown with Republicans owning the House and the Senate, and then it's up to the executive to decide what stays open and what closes. And now, as a result of their decisions, Americans are getting hurt. What an unbelievably direct way to hold this administration responsible for making decisions that are hurting American people.
Can't go to court. So on day 2, get rid of SNAP and food for hungry kids. It's not essential. Day 4, get rid of mass transit.
Good! This is what Americans voted for. Give it to them. If they want to shut down SNAP, if they want to shut down whatever the fuck programs, this is Republican governance. Let them govern, okay? Stop trying to fucking keep the train on the tracks in the background and let them govern. If they want to shut it all the fuck down, then let them do it. Let people suffer. Let people see the results of a Republican-run government. Let them see it.
Aid. Let New York City do it. Not essential. Cut back on Medicaid and health care. Within 2 weeks, everyone would have been howling. Furthermore, it's even worse. It has no off-ramp. Guess who determines when we leave the shutdown? The Republicans. And let's not forget how bad they are. This guy Vogt probably the most evil man. He's the guy who came up with that Project 2025.
Yes.
Yeah, he has a whole playbook of what to shut down. So they had said, one of the Republican senators who knows said to us, you'll be in the shutdown for 6 to 9 months till we totally destroy the federal government.
What are they doing right now? That's what they're doing. They're doing it right now. They're already doing that. It's happening right now.
The shutdown was a much worse alternative. I knew I'd get a lot of flack.
But Senator,
I took some bullets from other people.
And you're still taking bullets, but should you have let people know you're thinking ahead of time? Because really, people thought...
He said this ahead of time. It was stupid then, it's stupid now.
It came so fast. Hakeem and I had a strategy, which was to try and get a bipartisan bill.
Yeah.
Which meant...
You sound exactly like I did when we bailed out Wall Street. The Wall Street bailouts were different. It was unironically too big to fail. If we didn't bail out Wall Street, we would have been looking at like potentially, I don't want to say permanent catastrophic failure in the United States, but this was a financial crisis that was rippling out to the entire fucking world. We took down like the world economy with that crisis. In that point, a bailout. Also, this is like a nonpartisan or apolitical thing. Like the financial institutions are financial institutions, right? They're not like the Republicans or the Democrats or whatever. So in that case, I think you can make an argument for a bailout. But right now, if you want to compare it to that, the Democrats are like giving a bailout to the Republicans who are just shitting on the Democrats constantly. Like, I don't even know how you would make this a one-to-one comparison, but like imagine if the banks that got bailed out were to turn around and say, it was the government's fault that this happened and they're stealing money from the American people and we're your saviors and fuck the government and vote for us, the big banks. Or like, this is such a fucked situation. In government, both halves should be trying to govern, but only Democrats are trying to govern, to save the system. It's like, fucked.
In the House, the Republicans would have not been able to pass it. Only at the last minute did it happen that they all voted for it. And so Patty Murray tried to get that bipartisan bill on Wednesday. That's why I said we didn't have the votes yet. Mm-hmm. They pulled out Wednesday night, and Thursday we had 2 bad choices. But I assure the public, a shutdown would have been the greatest disaster we have to put the government in the sole hands of the evil, nasty, nihilistic people like Musk and Vogt and Trump. Would have been the greatest. We would have had half the federal government we have now. So I thought I did the thing a leader should do. Even when people don't see the danger around the curve, my job was to alert people to it, and I knew I'd get some bullets.
Senator, the leader in question, that is actually what people are debating right now. There are people in your party who don't want you to be a leader in the party anymore. And it's a question of what is this moment and what does it require? I want to ask a question about that moment involving the Venezuelan deportations and the court hearings around it. Put the charges or lack of evidence or whatever against these men aside for now, and let's just talk.
So could you argue that Schumer is doing what is better in the very short run, but also in the long run by not letting people see how shit Republicans are? Maybe. There's this other argument that I've heard floating behind the scenes, or not like connected behind the scenes, but that I see like floating around on Twitter and stuff. This argument that Republicans are fucking up right now. Don't give them a reason to blame Dems for anything, and just let them fuck up and then kind of see what happens. If that's like what they're going with secretly behind the scenes, I feel like I disagree with that spiritually or conceptually, but strategically that might be an argument. That might be a legitimate argument. I'm just not sure. I don't know enough. Nobody can like predict the future politically perfectly. Just answer this question and maybe I'll change my mind. So the Dems shut down the government. Now what? What happens next? What incentive does Trump have to reopen the government and come back to the table? What possible win comes out of it? They didn't negotiate beforehand, but now they'll suddenly be willing to. Why didn't they negotiate beforehand? Ask yourself that. Why didn't they negotiate beforehand? The reason why the Republicans didn't negotiate beforehand is because they don't have to. Why did Trump invade Ukraine? Because there's not going to be a punishment for it. Who cares? He can just do it and figure his shit out, right? The reason why the Republicans didn't negotiate beforehand is because they didn't think they needed to. And guess what? Schumer proved them right. They don't have to. They don't need to negotiate. The Dems are going to cave anyway. So yeah, Trump invaded Ukraine with Putin, okay? Russia invaded Ukraine. But why did the House pass this here to begin with? If a shutdown would have been so great for Trump, why did Trump not veto the CR? Well, that would be way too on its nose, obvious, but you should ask for something. And that would be really, I feel like that would be an easy point too. Also, you're running this assumption that Republicans are going to control the media at all points in time for the rest of our lives? Is that the case? Like, well, the Republicans can sell it better. Then work on your media strategy. Like, I feel like that's, if you can't sell the idea that they want to pass a continuing resolution, by the way, because they're still too incompetent to figure out a fucking budget. They want to pass a continuing resolution and they haven't given us a single provision. We don't get one thing. And they want us to help them pass it? Fuck you. If you can't sell that to the American people, then all of you should retire anyway. And bring on some fucking newer, younger people that actually can do shit in government. If that's your excuse, right? I don't know how to convince the American people that it's the other party who have majorities in both halves of Congress who won't give us a single line on the CR. They won't give us a single thing on the CR. I don't know how to tell the American people it's their fault. Then fuck you. Then get the fuck out and leave her for somebody who can.
Talk about the interaction of the Trump administration and the court.
Yes.
They seem to take the position that this court doesn't have jurisdiction over them, and you have Tom Homan saying he doesn't care what the judge thinks. What did Democrats do if and when the Trump administration defies a federal judge?
First of all, we have to have rule of law. People say, well, that's not me. If we get rid of rule of law, a 248-year tradition in America, this democracy is over, okay? So it's vital to stop it. There are two courts.
How do the Democrats do that?
There are two courts. One is the Court of Public Opinion.
What are you talking about?
And the public has to make, if this happens, they have to make their voices known.
That's what we should be preaching. They should have leveraged a single issue beforehand and pushed that across the entire nation. Then you can shut it down and not immediately lose. That was the fuck up, not the shutdown. Yeah, sure. They should have asked for something. And they need better speakers. I'm sorry, no, I don't like Schumer. I don't know why I said that. Fuck Schumer. They need that guy. Who was the guy who was screaming about this guy? We need people like this guy.
Sad morning.
I don't know who this guy is, but just more people. We need more speakers like this, or AOC, or even fucking Bernie Sanders. As long as he's messaging on, this is what we need to pass the CR. Fight for something. Fight for something. Even Pelosi was saying not to pass the CR. What's going on there? Hello? Why are Schumer and Pelosi disagreeing on things? The fuck is happening with that?
Musk and Donald Trump tell you to do. Where's the independence of the committee? Where's the legislature? We're an equal branch of government.
We need this guy.
And you start off with a
TV.
blather?
He's
and
a
yet,
yapper.
look at the empty seats here. Where's Elon Musk? I'm sure he's a genius and is a very credible person because of the wealth he's accumulated. But that does not put him above the law or the responsibility to come before this committee in this Congress. If he's so great, if these plans and all the fraud and abuse that he found are so eminent, why isn't he here explaining it?
True.
You know why.
True.
There are two courts. One is the Court of Public Opinion. And the public has to make, if this happens, they have to make their voices known, Democrats, Republicans, everyone, in the strongest terms, because it's ending our democracy. Now, first,
Tim Walz has been doing a good job. I've seen him out giving, I don't know what his future political plans are or what he's doing, but Walz is out there. I like Walz as a speaker as well. I think he has a good mix of, like, seems like he could be your gym teacher, cool dude, but also, like, strong speaker with a spine and everything. So far from what I've seen of him, I like Walz.
But we also have the courts. And so far, the lower courts have done a good job. We hope the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court will do the same job. When the lower courts, and I'm very proud that we put in all those judges last year, many of whom are making these decisions, when the lower courts thus far have said to the Trump administration, you must stop, in most cases they have.
What the fuck kind of statement is that? In most cases they have? Do you understand how deranged of a statement that is? Usually, the federal government has been, like, they mostly listen to the courts. That's an all or nothing, buddy. That's a binary fucking statement. Like, imagine, like, this is like a rape tier analogy. Like, when the wife and the husband are having sex, most of the time, it's not rape. Like, this is a binary statement. Like, Why would you say that? Mostly they listen to the court. Probably because most of the court rulings are not substantial or not that important or whatever. The big ones, we've got a TRO that's like lapsed by a month because they were begging the Supreme Court to bail them out, in which Roberts actually came out and found his spine for once in his life and said, fuck you. We mean mostly.
Said to the Trump administration, you must stop. In most cases, they have.
But if they don't, that's not my question. We're not going to pay
Don't say if they don't. There's already some that they've been ignoring. This is 1 day old.
attention to the court.
If they don't,
Yeah.
and we go to the Supreme Court and it is defied, democracy is at real risk, and there will have to be
what?
There will have to be
the extreme measures, the extreme things. Extreme. You couldn't even take the extreme measure of voting down a fucking CR. What the fuck extreme measures do you want? What are you talking about?
extraordinary action taken.
Tony touched on it.
What does that mean? Push for examples. If you're in media, or if you're a staffer, or if you're literally anybody in the world, if you're an academic, if you're a teacher, if you're whoever the fuck you are, please, for the love of fucking God, ask for examples for every single thing you talk about. Because without an example, nothing you say matters. Take extraordinary measures. How? What extraordinary measures? Give an example of that. What the fuck does that mean? Otherwise, it's nothing.
Senator.
And that is by the people, by everybody.
But there are people in your own party that are saying, look, it's time.
Oh, the people are going to do something. Oh, all the people. Thank you. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
For you to go. They no longer trust your leadership. They want somebody else in there. What do you say about that?
Here's what I say.
In your own party saying
Yes.
you've got to go.
Here's what I'm saying. I'm the best leader for the Senate. We have a lot of leaders. You know, when you don't have a president, there's not one leader of the party. There are lots of them. We have a lot of good people. But I am the best at keep winning Senate seats. I've done it in 2005. Just in 2020, no one thought we'd take back the Senate. Under my leadership, we took it. So
Was it really under your... Was that... I don't know how involved significant Schumer was. I know that Schumer and Pelosi, their names get thrown around a lot. I don't know how active Schumer is in making these decisions or helping senator people run for elections. I mean, he might be significant there, but...
Now,
you're not
our
going
executing...
anywhere. You're not going anywhere.
We have a great... We're moving forward. Hakeem and I have a plan. Let me just say this. There's a real contrast between the parties. The Republican Party now, particularly in office, is the party of rich oligarchs who want to really screw every average American so they can get tax cuts for the rich. And we are fighting that every day. So today...
I feel like... I need a ring sound effect. ...2016 called. They want their talking points back. Nobody cares about this tax cuts for the rich. We're way past this. We're talking about invading Greenland, annexing Canada, taking over Mexico, or trade warring them into non-existence, abandoning NATO. Like, we're way past the tax cuts for the billionaires line. Nobody cares about this, okay? Get up to date. We're in the culture wars now. You need to start talking culture wars talking points. You need to get people amped the fuck up on these types of cultural narrative talking points. No offense, but more Americans care about the transport shit than fucking tax cuts for billionaires, all right? Or tax cuts for the wealthy. These are old talking points, okay? Catch up.
We just issued a statement at 8 o'clock that describes it. Hakeem and I, we have a day of action on Medicaid. In every state, in every corner of the country, Democrats are talking about they're going to Medicaid centers. They're going to people who would be deprived and
Senator, people don't have faith in the Democrats.
Well, let me say this.
And those average Americans.
And we're going to do this day in, day out on issues. Why are they doing tariffs and raising your cost $2,000? It's beginning to work. Why are they taking away Fannie and Freddie and raising your housing costs dramatically? It's beginning to work. His numbers have come down. If we keep at it every day, relentless fighting and showing how they're hurting people so badly, Trump's numbers will get much lower. And his both popularity, but also his effectiveness will decline. I believe that strategy will work.
May I hold up the book?
Yes.
Yeah, let's get to the book.
This is why you were here.
Yes.
The book that stays news, anti-Semitism.
Yeah, it's coming out at a time where you said you never thought you'd have to write this book, but you never thought anti-Semitism would be as bad as it is. You said for many non-Jewish people, it's alarming, but it's not a real problem and not a priority. And to that you say...
Who cares?
Yeah, Jewish people, we carry 5,000 years of history on our back. Conor Cruise O'Brien, the great Irish poet, said anti-Semitism is a light sleeper. When things get bad, often, almost in too many societies, it turns on the Jews. You know, I was brought up between 1950, I was born in 1950. For the first 50 years, the Jewish people, we call it the Golden Medina. Jews did great in America, like everybody else. We were advancing up the ladder. There was very little anti-Semitism because the pall of the Holocaust hung over America, and people realized what could happen. But starting in 2000 with 9/11, a little worse in the financial crisis, where a lot of them accused Jewish financiers, but it got much worse in 2017. So that for the first time, Jewish Americans say, maybe it could happen here, like it happened everywhere else. So I wrote this book. I wrote this book aimed at 5 audiences, and then I'll add a 6th. First, my generation. So they see we're not alone. My experience is often their experience. Second, to my generation's children. They know what's going on, but they didn't know the struggles of Israel, the history of anti-Semitism. You know, they know our holidays. There's a joke about the 3 words that describe every Jewish holiday.
I know this. What is it? They tried to kill us. We survived. Let's eat.
They tried to kill us. We survived. Let's eat.
Yes.
So they know about it. But third, it's aimed at non-Jewish people who say, you know, it's bad, but why are they so sensitive?
True.
You read this book, you'll see it.
Right.
Finally, I'm aiming it at my left, my people on the left, my friends on the left. I've always been a progressive, but we've always seen anti-Semitism on the right. You saw those people at 9/11, at January 6th wearing shirts that more than 6.
Oh, no! Wait, oh, no, he's an anti-Semite, sorry. I was going to say, oh, shit, he just gave away the whole 9/11 terror plot.
Million. But now a lot of it's trickled over to the left, and that's bad, too. And finally, I hope every student and every school makes this advisory or required reading. And you know who else should read it? Donald Trump.
I'm sure you're public.
He has shown, let me just say this, he'd do a lot to read it, because Donald Trump, let me just finish this quick point.
Let him finish.
Donald Trump
We're talking about
has
anti-Semitism
shown
now.
That he regards Jews as transactional. Oh, they're good for votes, they're good for money. He has no understanding of the Jewish people, and it leads him to do bad things, sitting down with that anti-Semite Fuentes. When Charlottesville occurred, saying both sides are to blame. Cutting off funds to our synagogues that need protection from anti-Semitism.
Cutting off funds? What, does the government fund fucking synagogues? What's going on here? Hello? What?
This is an important question here. You're doing the one hand, on the other hand, it's like Fiddler on the Roof here. One and the other hand. And on the other hand, this is an important question, though, that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
Anti-Semitism, and then the line between anti-Semitism and criticism of Israel, its government, its actions.
Great question. To criticize Israel is not anti-Semitic. I've done it. I got a lot of flack when I criticized Netanyahu a while back. But when it goes over the line and you call someone an effing Zionist or effing Jew, how about the guy who went on the subway car and said, all Zionists get out of the subway car? How about the head of the Brooklyn Museum, Jewish, but nothing to do with Israel, whose house was scarred in red paint?
Damn.
And when people say, from the river to the sea, that's the Hamas slogan. Hamas is genocide.
Jesus, Schumer, with the worst arguments ever for, oh man, the conflation of Israel with Jews. Damn, okay.
They want to get rid of all the Jews. You know, their charter says, that a Jew behind a tree? Shoot him. When Hamas does these things and says river to the sea, that is anti-Semitic.
I'm sorry, the nature of these morning shows is the commercials come very fast. We're going to go to the break here. I hope people do read it. Anti-Semitism in America, a warning, is on sale today. Senator Schumer, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for doing what you do, and thank you
for
be
right back.
Caring about the book.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see if we can... Oh, we're not going to get through all of this. David Shore. I almost spoke to this guy. I might still. We're friendly on Instagram.
I've been spending some time recently...
Okay! Stop! His voice is getting more bassy in every video, right? Am I hallucinating? What do we got going on here? Come on. What?
Democrats have a problem that runs deeper than the 2024 election. I've been spending some time recently with top Democrats.
Ezra, stop. He's transforming into... How far back? What were we a month ago?
So earlier this week, I released
what's
an
going on
audio
here?
essay on Donald Trump.
So play YMCA.
This is 4 weeks ago.
So earlier this week, I released an audio essay on Donald Trump. So earlier,
this is 2 weeks ago.
Democrats have a problem that runs deeper than the 2024 election. They have a problem that runs deeper.
And this is today.
I've been spending some time recently with top Democrats as they think about how to rebuild after the 2024 loss. And I'll say that in the 20-some years I've been covering politics, I have never heard them so confused.
America is back.
Why do Dem leadership still treat Trump and his cronies like regular politicians? It's been 10 years of these Republican hacks proving they're willing to lie, cheat, and steal in order to gain power. It's really hard, I think, for people to change up. It's just hard for people to accept the new paradigm. And usually, like, an old generation has to die off or something significant has to happen for people to realize, okay, the old rule book isn't working anymore. I haven't studied this in detail, so I'm just passing along memes I've heard. I don't know how true this is. I'm just giving that as a hedge. But I've heard it said that in the beginning of World War II, one of the reasons why German tanks and the German like blitzkrieg strategy was so effective is because a lot of European nations were expecting to go back to the trenches. That they're like, all right, well, you know, remember World War I, trench warfare, we did get our shit or whatever. And then like these German tanks are just like literally rolling through shit. And it's like, hold on, this is not working. And then it was just like nobody was ready for that style of warfare. I don't know how true that is or how significant that was on the early impacts of the early war or whatever, but it's a thing I've heard said. But in general, I think adapting to new paradigms is just very difficult for people to do. And you want to push your rule set on your last paradigm as much as you can before you accept that it's not working anymore. It's like learning a new strategy for a game or for anything, you know, where you're like, okay, this isn't working, but I'm going to do my last strategy even better. And it's really hard for you to abandon it and be like, okay, fuck, the strategy doesn't work at all. We have to change something completely new, you know? Also, because it's like breaking a bad habit, it's going to get worse before it gets better. So if you change strategies out to something different, you're probably going to struggle a bit in the beginning, and then people are going to get mad, and they're going to tell you, and keep in mind it's politics, so it's popular opinion. People are going to get mad at you, and they're going to tell you, you need to go back to what you were doing before. So it's a lot, you know? Wait, we got my polling stuff up. Hold on. That happened multiple times in modern history. They used the rules of the last war for this one, and they're forced to change. Yeah, I've heard that. Famously in Braveheart, they show that like the American troops would, you know, do the guerrilla warfare stuff, and the British troops were more organized in columns and stuff. It's probably exaggerated in that movie. I don't think it's, or no, it's not Braveheart. It was The Patriot. Sorry, Braveheart was the nonfiction account of William Wallace, Scotland. But there probably was something to be said for American guerrilla warfare, guerrilla style warfare versus British troops not being, one, as familiar with the lay of the land, and then two, not having the same types of, I guess, like strategies or abilities to deal with that style of warfare. Okay. How many responses did we get from this? Wait, does it say? Total responses. Were there? Question mark. I think it was around 15 or 20,000. If you go on the tab survey responses, you will see. Do I have to control A for how many? Count numbers? 15,721? Is that how many responses? Split VOD. Hold on, I gotta open this shit. There you go. What were your, wait, let me use the restroom quick, hold on. Or I guess you can have this. Hold on. Okay. What were your political leanings prior to joining the DGG community? 1.8% were far right. 8.2% were socialist/communist. So from the left. 3.9% were very conservative, or MAGA. 20.1% were conservative. 18.7% were progressive. Oh, you can't see that. I think my camera's blocking it. Woke, far left, not communist. And then 12.9% were not very politically oriented, and 34.4% were liberal. All right. What were your political leanings? Jesus Christ. We are a converting camp. My God. Okay, I haven't actually looked at these yet, so. So now 4.5% are conservative, 1.9% are not very politically oriented, 2.9% are socialist communist, 11.5% are woke. I think somebody tried to make a bot to create like 5,000 votes for African Nazis. Congratulations. So I think we ended up tossing a lot of the far right votes on this slide, although we still have some of them, 49 are far right, but. What kind of Destiny content had the greatest part in bringing you into the DGG community? Debates with an aggressive/combative tone is 54.5%. Debates with a conversational/understanding tone, 19.3%. And then social commentary. So like red pill stuff was about 10%. Gaming stuff, 6%. Drama-centered content, 6%. Researched is 2.4%. Short-form political content like non-debate stream clips, 2.5%. This is, I think, a newer style of content that I'm doing, so not too bad, I guess. We'll see in a year how this plays out. What kind of Destiny content had the greatest impact on your political viewpoints and alignment? So this is what brought you into the community and then what changed your mind once you were here. So debates with conservatives with an understanding and conversational tone. Once you're here. Stop this autistic shit. Hold on. I'll just say this one time and then I'm never responding to this point again, okay? Destiny, it should be narrowed for whether it's aggressive against the political beliefs they had or ones against the side. They just like, a whole bunch of you fucking retards are typing shit like, actually, Destiny, you need to have an option where the debate actually starts out with an aggressive tone and then 50% through it becomes conversational in nature. Or you need to have ones where the first 25% blah, blah. No, fuck off. You pick the one that fits closest and then that's it, okay? I'm not here to have 15,000 options for every single person to listen to debate, okay? Jesus, fuck. Oh my God. Pick the one that most closely picks your shit, okay? Or fits your thing. Jesus. Debates in an aggressive/combative tone. Yeah, like a lot. Probably one of the biggest ones is people were like, "Oh, you don't have a libertarian option." None of you are actual libertarians. Pick the one that most closely matches your belief. Fuck you, okay? I'm not doing this fake libertarian bullshit where you're like, you're just a conservative who likes drugs. Okay, get the fuck out of here with this retarded shit. Ooh, research focus streams are 15.5%. Damn, that's a lot bigger than I thought it would be. Short form political content is 4.2%, and then social commentary, no, still 9%. I feel like this tracks a lot with people say that a common email that I'll get is, I watched you debate one of my heroes, and then it feels like you made him look stupid because it was an aggressive debate. And so I got mad and I started watching your channel more. And then usually these types of debates are more, when I saw you talk to this guy and it was more understanding, I understood your thought process more and blah, blah, blah. Although there's still a lot of aggressive people here. But 39% was debate with conversational or understanding tone. What kind of content do you think would be most effective in shifting the political ideology of someone unfamiliar with Destiny? It is crazy and funny how much this aggressive tone thing shrinks. I wonder if people are putting the answer that they think is true or the answer that they think is true for other people. Although I guess for this, it asks you for other people. Because in the first one, 55% of people say an aggressive debate is what brought me into the community. 31% say the aggressive debate is what shifted my political viewpoint. And then only 23% say that that would be the most effective way of bringing other people in. The conversational and understanding tone grows to 45%, even though it was 39% in that it changed the political views, and it was only 19% in bringing people initially into the community. That's interesting. %8 female, 92% male. Good job. We need to get this number down more. God, I'm just kidding. Saw you mentioned buying the Mosin because of DayZ. I just got the AK-74U because of DayZ. Love you. Nice, cute. 54% of our people are 25 to 35. 33.6% are 19 to 24. 36 to 50. Oh, damn. So a comfortable majority is over the age of, is 25 or older. %46 of people discovered me from my YouTube channel. 31% discovered me from somebody else's YouTube channel. 2.2% from Reddit. We still got 17.6% from Twitch. And then TikTok is at 2.1% right now. Over half of our fan base is 3+ years old. 30.5% discovered me 5 to 10 years ago. 37.2%, 3 to 5 years ago. And then 4.3% is less than a year old. 1 to 2 years ago is 18.9%. 10+ years is 9.2%. Oh, wait, so that was even bigger. 67. Like 78% plus, 79%, almost 80% are 3 years or older fans. %26% are European, 66% American, and Canadians. Jeez. Cute. I guess the it just has to be some balance of aggressive and patient conversations, I guess. I was just curious if I did that. How many voted? 16,000? I was curious if I did that, about that, I think. If I did that poll, I was curious if there would be some huge number that would jump out. In a way, that was kind of the most disappointing result. Or not disappointing, I guess, but nothing really was crazy about that. I wonder if I could break it out by age and see if different ages of people are influenced by things more.
I've been spending some time recently with top Democrats as they think about how to rebuild after the 2024 loss. And I'll say that in the 20-some years I've been covering politics, I have never heard them so confused.
America is back.
How could they have possibly lost this election to this person? But also, how is the Democratic Party weakening so much among groups whose strength, whose support it once took for granted?
I also think, and I know we're watching a lot of Ezra Klein, and this is kind of the kick that he's on at the moment, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with examining this. But I do think it's important to maintain perspective on everything, because especially as we watch more of this content, and I don't know if other Democrats are falling into this hole. When I'm saying, like, we need the Democratic Party has to get back on track, they need to figure out ways to survive in this media environment, like, all of this is important, like, they've obviously made a lot of missteps and mistakes. It's not like, again, the Democrats have this completely and totally fucked party that just got destroyed in the last election. That's what the conservatives wanted to sell, but it's all still like pretty close. Like nothing is hopeless at the moment. Like there's a world where I would actually argue right now, okay, I would argue right now that the Democrats could probably even stay on track with their loser messaging and still have an over 50% chance of doing well in 2026 and maybe even 2028, just because the Trump stuff could fuck up so badly, right? So it's not like everything is hopeless and lost. It's just good to reimagine or reinvent yourself and move forward. And don't just rely on the other party to make mistakes for you to get ahead. Like you should be able to create moments of your own and capitalize on that and move into the future. Yeah.
Young voters, non-white voters, working class voters. What does it mean that the Democratic Party is losing what was once its base, its reliable base? Someone whose analysis on this I've come to respect over the years is David Shore. David Shore is the head of data science at Blue Rose Research, which is a big Democratic consulting firm.
So first, this is a big table of numbers.
Do you think America's low literacy rate for a developed country hurt this election? I don't know. Another opinion that I agree with from George Santos is we need to axe social studies and we need to just go back to teaching fucking straight civics. I'm going to be honest, that might not be the best idea, but my recollection of social studies in grade school was just straight trash. I feel like I learned so much random disconnected shit because you're too young to learn much about the world or give a fuck much about anything. You don't learn anything in depth at all. But I feel like you could learn how the government works, at least for like the first 4 years. Like maybe other people did take civics, or did you guys have it? Maybe just because I was a private school kid, maybe we didn't have civics. I never took a class on civics ever. I feel like that would be pretty important.
It does a huge amount of political surveying and interpretation of data and testing of messaging, and it's gotten a lot of things right before other people did, including that educational polarization was becoming the central fault line for American democracy. And so when I saw Shore recently, and he began walking me through some of his slides, some of the ways he was interpreting the 2024 election and trying to help people see what had happened, my first thought was this would be worth doing in public, rather than this being a thing that Democrats are debating in back rooms with each other. What if we did this in public? And so this episode is a bit of an experiment. He's walking me through this presentation and I am interrogating it. But I found this really, really helpful. I don't necessarily have every conclusion David does, but I think it is a good place to begin. And there's then a lot that can follow from having this conversation. As always, my email is ezrakleinshow@nytimes.com. David Shore, welcome to the show.
Excited to be here.
So what do you do? And why should I trust the data you're about to show us here?
I'm glad you asked. I'm the co-founder of a research firm called Blue Rose Research. We did 26 million interviews last year. We have a team of about 45 people, machine learning engineers, software engineers from companies like Google. And, we've done a lot of work to try to figure out what actually happened last year.
A lot of liberals I know feel really burnt by survey data. There's a sense that nobody picks up the phone. How are you surveying these older people if you're doing it online? Putting aside the fact that you conducted a lot of surveys, why are you confident those surveys reflect reality?
The fundamental, problem with survey research is just that people who answer...
Fuck. There's one of two things he can say. He's going to say the people that answer surveys aren't representative of an ordinary voting population. Maybe, because only certain people answer surveys. I feel like that's the basic one. A second one that I feel very strongly about, that I have no data at all to support, and it's just my vibe, I don't know if you'll get into this, is when people answer survey questions, they don't actually know what they're giving an answer to. Like, if I were to ask somebody, what's your number one issue with the United States right now? And they were to answer, my number one issue is I feel like wages are down. What they might actually be saying is, I got passed over by my boss for a raise because my boss is a fucking piece of shit and he hates me and he gave the raise instead to his fucking brother. And the way that comes out is my wage is stagnant, or I feel like I'm not earning as much money as I should. And that ends up being the answer to the poll, even though there's some other underlying feeling. Or it might be for trans stuff. I feel like trans stuff is taking over the United States, but the actual answer might just be that they feel like there aren't enough, I don't know, people in their life that are Christian anymore, or they're mad that their kid got caught listening to Wet Ass Pussy because they listen to a lot of bench press, something like that, But we'll see what he says. I don't know.
Reflect reality.
The fundamental, problem with survey research is just that people who answer surveys are really weird. there's kind of two ways.
Fuck, yeah, it's okay. It's going to be that one. There's a different demographic of people who answer surveys than who actually vote in elections.
Can try to fix that. One is that you could try to get a normal representative set of people. That's just impossible in today's day and age. And the other is that you can just try to collect a lot of information so that you can, adjust for how weird they are. The reason I feel fairly confident about this is just, in our work, every time we make any change, to any part of our system, we go back and back test and see how it affects accuracy across every other election that we've ever surveyed. We can't be fully confident about any particular thing that we say. A lot of the data isn't back yet, but I think that there's enough data to tell a coherent story. There's the 26 million survey respondents of 8 million unique people. There's precinct and county level election results. We're also going to try to tie together all of the external data that other people have done. And, what I'll say about this election is that our forecasts this cycle were very accurate. Our overall error was about 1/3% nationally. And I think that, most of the things that we thought would happen did bear out. And, I do want to spend a second to answer, something that you'd asked a second ago, which is just like, why look at survey data?
Something that I also think would be interesting to do regressively, I'll never do this because it'd be way too much work, is go through all of the historic voting data on every single county and then randomly generate a projection for the next election and just do like plus or minus 2 percentage points, I guess, on everything and see if your guess ends up being better or on track with most other people. I'm curious how much it's just like people tend to vote a certain way. And for the most part, as long as you're within some tail, like you're probably going to be pretty, I'm curious how accurate that would be. I don't know.
I think that, super politically engaged people are overrepresented at every single step of the political process. They're more likely to...
From the people who answer polls all the way up to people in Congress and people who are staffers and people who are working for think tanks. This is a huge issue.
That, super politically engaged people are overrepresented at every single step of the political process. They're more likely to run for office. They're more likely to work in campaigns and journalism.
Yeah.
They're more likely to, listen to podcasts like this one. And I think that they're really the only point other than election day, when regular people get a say, is in polls. And so I think there isn't really any democratic alternative, to trying to listen to the people and hear what they have to say.
So I take that point. I always think it is good to remind me and everybody who listens to the show that they are weird.
Because we just had this issue pop up today where some guy in chat was like, so you think half the Nazis weren't evil? Isn't most of MAGA evil? And it's like, it truly is. And like, arguably, even I don't do a good job at stressing this point because I'll be exasperated and I'll be screaming at conservatives and shit I debate with. The reality is the vast majority of people just are totally not plugged in whatsoever to any big political thing. Like if you ask somebody about, don't you think Trump violating a TRO is bad? It's like, violating it? What is a TRO? And it's like, isn't that just the government? Like the judges are just the government, right? It's like, no, the judges are totally different. They're not part of the government. Well, yeah, but it's a different branch of government. And maybe they are a little politically plugged in. They're like, wait, I thought Trump chose the judges. So why does that even matter? Like you go into the public thinking all these evil, it's like the guy in the party meme, kind of, where he's in the corner and he's like, none of these people know how much of a threat Trump is to democracy. And all of the other people are dancing and they're just like, bro, shit was expensive last year. I don't know anything about that. I don't give a fuck. Like, it's just like these people have no idea. And it's not even because they're stupid. Like, it sounds like judgmental or condescending. It's just most people just aren't plugged into it at all. People that follow politics, to some extent, do it as a hobby. You do it because you enjoy it, right? I do this because I enjoy it. Hassan and Asmagul and everybody else does it because it's fun. It's enjoyable. And if you don't have the hobby of politics, my God, following the actual political conversations themselves would be excruciatingly obnoxious. Jesus, how annoying and terrible would it be? And boring and just, ugh.
And if their intuitions about politics were shared, politics would not look the way it does at all.
Right.
Right? The voting population were Ezra Klanjo listeners and people...
True. Wait. You should form a set of rules, let's call them keys, that could accurately predict their election results. Could be interesting. Oh, true. Maybe. We should work on that.
Politics would not look the way it does at all.
Right.
Right? The voting population were Ezra Klanjo listeners and people they know,
right,
then elections end up very differently.
Right.
So I take a point on survey data. So where do we begin?
All right. So first, I'm just going to start with this slide over here that just looks at support for the Democratic presidential candidate in 2016, in 2020, and 2024 by race and ideology. In 2016, Democrats got 81% of Hispanic moderates. And in 2024, Democrats got 58% of Hispanic moderates. That's only about 7% more than the 52% that they got of white moderates.
That's pretty spooky.
The main story with respect to this is just a continuation of the trends that we saw 4 years ago. Throughout the entire Trump campaign, we've seen this racial depolarization.
The thing I find most surprising here is
this is one of the reasons also why, and people get mad at me because I think this applies even to Nazis. I guess maybe it's my fault because I say it jokingly sometimes, but like the neo-Nazi movement in the United States, like the underpinning really is more on like white separatism as opposed to white supremacy. And they are fairly inclusive of other types of ethnicities, as long as they're also okay with, not importing a bunch more new, brown or black people. And a lot of people that are parts of those movements are okay with that. And they won't even be like that racist towards the people that are here. Like they do draw a distinction in like, well, these are the good Mexicans, these are the bad ones. And if you think that's racist for white people to do it, you better fucking believe immigrants do it as well.
You look at white voters, liberal, moderate, and conservative, and at least in this data from 2016 to 2024, there's a 0% swing in any of them. Because there are all these things that, if you go back to the debates we were having about Donald Trump then, it is the return and resurgence of a coalition trying to protect white power in this country. And I wrote things about this. I think there's good reason to believe that. Right. Even if that was part of the intention then.
Like, I hate that. Or maybe I'll give Ezra Klein credit. I'm sure there's more to that analysis than as silly as it sounds, but.
Power in this country. And I wrote things about this. I think there's good reason to believe that. Right. Even if that was part of the intention then, that does not appear in the results. Democrats lose modest amount of support among black voters in those years. They lose a huge amount of support.
You also have to be really careful too, and I don't know, I'm praying that Ezra doesn't fall into this trap, and I don't think so. You have to be so careful when you talk about entrenching white supremacy, because oh my God, we did a lot of these debates over the curriculum stuff. You got to be so careful when you talk about what white supremacy is, because progressives lost the plot on that years ago. Progressives will get in front of a group of black people and Hispanic people and say shit like white people are entrenching white supremacy by only wanting to reward hard work and saying that you have to learn one way and that you have to keep schedules. And we all know that these are white supremacist constructs. And it's like, motherfucker, you understand that like black people and Hispanic people hear you say shit like this and it sounds like you're talking like they're apes. Like these people are too fucking retarded to use a Google Calendar or don't know how to use a fucking smartphone. What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, it's not white supremacist to expect somebody to show up to a job on time or to be able to speak properly. Believe it or not, this is really crazy. I haven't dropped this bomb on stream yet, but you know there are black people that can hear when you're speaking like Ebonics versus speaking more properly, right? It's not like black people have that built into their programming and they can only speak one. Like, there's tons of different ideas and thoughts between all of these different groups of people, just like white people, believe it or not. And yeah, talking down to these like ethnic minorities like this, where it's like, no, man, you should be able to come in and speak like that to the boss. Oh, fuck me. I was the worst Ebonics impression ever. Delete my voter rep, right? Like, every person in the United States who is of color, okay, doesn't only function in the most stereotypically fucking racist way possible, okay? That was my best D impersonation of Obama impersonation, okay? Fuck you.
Among Hispanic voters and a kind of significant amount among Asian voters. Why do you think that is?
I think that a lot of political analysis in America has been, really centered around viewing everything through a very America-centric lens. Because there's this story in American politics. Like, if you want to understand 20th century American politics, then the big story is that there was this giant Southern realignment in 1964.
Driven by the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah, driven by the Civil Rights Act. And that carried forward. It took a really long time, for that to really work its way through down ballot. And so I think it was really tempting for American political scientists and kind of a lot of the, more detail-oriented American political pundits to just kind of see everything.
People who wrote books like Why We're Polarized, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Just to see everything through this
through the lens of race.
Information. Thomas Piketty actually, recently wrote a great book about, the thing I'm about to talk about. But I think the most important trend politically of the last 30 to 40 years, both here and in every other country in the world, at least Western country that has elections, has been the story of education polarization. That basically
education and city and urban stuff, right? Yeah, the divide is growing. I really liked. Fuck! I hate how smart this guy is for political messaging. I highly recommend, if you give a fuck about just how to do politically effective work, I guess. How is it hard to find this? The fuck? Wait, am I retarded? Gavin Newsom, Charlie Kirk. Why is this thing at like number 1? Oh. Charlie Kirk has like such a good explanation for like this education stuff. Like if you were listening to Charlie Kirk speak politically, if he's like, like out in a rally, he's going to say the cultural Marxists have brainwashed all these professors, but he gives just a pretty good, like simple explanation. I don't know if I buy it completely, but it's
which Midwest was traditionally more of an ACT.
But this has been a point of pride for you that you didn't do a 4-year degree.
Well, yeah, because I represent most of the country. Is that actually still the majority of the country does not have a college degree. And if I may, bluntly critique the Democrat Party, you guys have become so college credentialed and educated that you guys snobbishly look on the muscular class of this country, people that kept things afloat and running during COVID. And yeah, I mean, the majority of the country didn't go to Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Stanford, Caltech, or Cal Berkeley, right? And the Republican Party has become far more representative of them, large in part thanks to Trump. But yeah, and look, I say it with some pride also because as an entrepreneur, I try to build something. right? Not just seek a credential.
Love that. And there are, what, 11 million folks, there are 11 million jobs out there. You make this point all the time.
Oh, yeah. Open jobs that don't require a college
degree.
degree.
Do not require a college degree. So when you say, and it's interesting because there's sort of that critique of the Democratic Party that we are captured by the sort of college elite. In what respect? I mean, stress test that for a second. Allow me to. What specifically are you referencing in that context?
Well, your voters have become nearly, I mean, the higher you go up the education ladder, the higher the correlation it is that you vote for the Democrat Party. It's almost a one-to-one with PhD. It's like 75% for master's degrees and it's 65% for
why do you think that's the case? What are the issues that sort of are identified in that respect?
The sloppy analysis is like, oh, they're smarter, therefore they must be Democrats.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's silly and insane.
Yeah.
But
insulting.
I totally agree. Yeah. The deeper and more profound analysis is that a lot of ideological bubbles that exist on these college campuses, they are homogeneous, not heterodox when it comes to what ideas are expressed. And then secondly, the value system that you leave on college campuses is high trust of institutions. So the biggest divide in America is not right versus left. It's whether or not you generally trust institutions or you don't trust institutions.
So I like that he says this because this is a thing that I've been saying for years now, right? That we're in an establishment versus anti-establishment era. It's not just left or right. But also, that does make sense. If you go to college and you get a degree, you're probably more likely to trust part of the system because you've literally been through the system. And then you get a job largely thanks to the system. And the higher you go through that, you're literally becoming more part of the system and you're working more with the system and you're getting a degree because of the system. And then you're working more to reinforce, like that. This makes sense. It tracks more why this educational divide would exist. And then subsequently, the people that don't engage with education and then they don't get good jobs and they don't get, it's not like they're going to see that as favorable where they're like, oh shit, I should have went to school. It's more, I don't know, you have a grudge against those people. Obviously they communicate differently than you. You start to develop different political opinions. Like this makes a lot of sense, I think.
And this has been largely inverted the last 20 years.
Right.
So back in the early 2000s, Democrats were low trust of institutions, Iraq War, anti-Bush, anti-NSA, anti-Patriot Act. And that's when you guys had a lot of activist spark and energy. That has been completely inverted. So the right is now low trust of institutions where the left is high trust of institutions. We're the ones that challenge the COVID vaccine. We're the ones that think that public health authorities might have lied to us during COVID. Right. We're the ones that don't necessarily believe the government when it says that we should keep on sending money to Ukraine. Again, that's a general rule. There's some exceptions to that.
But it's a good thing to keep in mind. I highly recommend that podcast. This is a very, very good analysis of how Charlie Kirk does political messaging, I think.
But world, at least Western country that has elections, has been the story of education polarization. You know, that basically everywhere we've seen highly educated people move to the left and, working class people move to the right. I think a lot of people's analytical error when looking at Trump is that they saw Trump as this kind of reincarnation of, the 1960s, of like George Wallace or something, when really I think he was representing this global trend. You could look at a bunch of other countries. You have Marine Le Pen and
the United Kingdom with Brexit and all the anti-immigration shit across Europe and everything, yeah.
In France, you have, the AfD in Germany. And I think that, people miss that, there was kind of a broader global appeal, this kind of polarization.
I don't know if people remember this as much, but like Brexit and Trump literally felt like they went hand in hand internationally. Like these two movements, I'm pretty sure Trump supported Brexit. I think he like literally was speaking about it. And the Brexiters all seemed to kind of like Trump. There's like these two movements felt like they were very tightly intertwined, even though they're like, we're so separate in terms of obviously geography and the different problems faced in the UK and America, but they still felt spiritually like they were united.
And on values.
The other thing that I find interesting here is the shift in voters who self-describe as conservative.
Right.
There's no shift in white self-described conservative voters between 2016 and 2024, but Democrats are winning 85% of black conservatives in 2016, but only 77% in 2024. They're winning 34% of conservative Hispanics in 2016. That falls by half to 17% in 2024. They're winning 28% of conservative Asians in 2016. That falls to 20% in 2024. So it's always a little bit weird for somebody who is self-described conservative to be voting for Democrats who are quite a liberal party now. What we're seeing among non-white voters is people voting more their ideology and less their ethnic group.
That's exactly right. And, I would just say, I think, this shouldn't be that surprising. I think now, we identify the Democratic Party as straightforwardly liberal. The Democratic Party used to be a coalition between liberals and moderates and conservatives. And as liberals kind of became the dominant coalition partner, it makes sense, that the conservatives and moderates in our coalition, who were disproportionately non-white, given that this ideological polarization happened, among whites 20 years ago or 30 years ago, that you would start to see this.
All right, let's move to slide 2 here.
All right. But there were some new 20 years ago that your coalition, who were disproportionately non-white, given that this ideological polarization happened, among whites 20 years ago or 30 years ago, that you would start to see this.
All right, let's move to slide 2 here.
All right. But there were some new trends this cycle. So
I can hear you go into presentation voice.
Yeah, no, great.
You're good.
Yeah. So this slide over here has what I think is probably the most important story of this cycle. So I have two graphs over here. The first breaks down 2024 support by whether or not you had voted in 2020. And so this is New York Times data from, Nate Cohn's Upshot polling, probably the highest quality public pollster in America. And what you can see here is just that in 2020, in their data, people who didn't vote, if they had voted, would have been a little bit more Democratic than the country overall. But over the next 4 years, people who didn't vote went from being a somewhat Democratic-leaning group to a group that Trump won by double digits.
People who did. Okay, hold on. I'm trying to see if I can understand this. Non-voters. Okay, so if you... among 2020 voters. So the top group, these are people who did vote in 2020, or not top, it's the second line. And then these are people who didn't vote in 2020. So if you didn't vote in 2020, you were probably Democratic leaning. And then when you did vote in 2024, you were massively Trump leaning. If you did vote in 2020, for the most part, they still voted Democratic in 2024. oh, this is cute. I feel like this tracks with the vibe take I had of you never, ever, ever hear somebody say both sides are bad, so I guess I'm just going to vote for Kamala, or I guess I'm just going to vote for Biden. And it's always, the people who always said both sides were bad were always voting for Trump or just not voting. It's so fucking annoying. But
okay. So the second graph here, we have for every precinct, we look at what percentage of people voted in 2022, and then we just look at what was the change in Democratic vote share from 2020 to 2024. And so what you could see here is that for the lowest turnout precincts, Trump increased his vote share by, something like 6%, while for the highest turnout precincts, Harris actually increased her support. And, that's really the story of this election is that, people who follow news really closely, who get their news from traditional media, who say that politics is an important part of their identity, they became more Democratic in absolute terms. But for people who don't follow politics closely at all, they just became a lot more Republican.
It's interesting because I obviously get a lot of incoming from people who would like the New York Times to cover Donald Trump differently.
Right.
And some of those arguments I agree with, some of them I don't, right? That's what I always think about with that, though, is that if your lever is New York Times headlines, you're not affecting the voters you are losing.
Right.
And the question Democrats are facing when you look at how badly they lost less politically engaged voters is how do you change the views of voters that you don't really have a good way to reach?
Yeah. And that's 100% right. And, I just want to stress that this is a new problem. This problem didn't exist 4 years ago. And, it's not just that New York Times readers are more liberal than the overall population. That's definitely true. It's that they're more liberal than they were 4 years ago, even though the country went the other way. And so there's this great political divergence, between people who consume all the news sources that we know about and read about versus the people who don't. And so as a result of these changes, this is really reversed a decades-long truism in American politics, where for the longest time, Democrats have said, and it's been true, that if everybody votes, we win, and that higher turnout is good for Democrats. And this is the first cycle where that definitively became the opposite of true.
This is something, and maybe I'm cheating because I think I'm borrowing from David Shor's earlier analyses, and I always used to make fun of Republicans for being so fucking afraid of voter turnout, but it's just been assumed that more and more voter turnout would always help Democrats, and that's not necessarily the case. It's one of the reasons why I thought that people get mad over the mail-in voting or whatever, and I never thought it was that big of a deal. Or there's also research that shows when people talk about like voter suppression, I think that when you're doing big things to suppress voter turnout, so maybe like tossing voter rolls or basically finding ways to make it so that people aren't registered to vote, like those can be big things. But when people talk about, they closed the voting booths, so they were less available and like people to wait 5 hours in line to vote, I think that research showed that didn't really matter that much. If you showed up to vote and you wanted to vote, you were there, whether it was for 12 hours or whether it was for 2 hours. People would not go home, I think was the research. And that's contrary to a lot of the talk that you hear that these things, it's so easy to discourage people from voting. And I don't think that was the case. If they wanted to vote, they would go out and vote, and just closing a poll or closing a voting booth or whatever wasn't enough to deter people, generally speaking. But also, that idea that, if we just get more people to vote, the Democrats always win, that was starting to fade, I think, by 2016. I think there was already contention there. By 2020, even with mail-in votes, people were saying these don't necessarily favor Democrats, and then now I guess David Shor is saying this completely flipped, yeah.
Here, I just have some numbers. If only people who had voted in 2022 had voted, Harris would have won the popular vote and also the Electoral College fairly easily. While if everyone had voted, Trump would have won the popular vote by nearly 5 points. Generally, what you see now is that every measure of socioeconomic status and political engagement is just monotonically related to your chance of liking Trump.
What is monotonically related?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Just that.
This is why Democrats can't win.
That's exactly right.
Monotonically. Does that mean a single thing can predict how likely a group is to vote for one side or the other? Just one single fact?
Problem. But it's basically just that the more, even the lowest, political engagement categories, the lowest education categories, the poorer, the lower socioeconomic status, the less engaged you are in politics, now the more Trumpy you are. And that just wasn't true 4 years ago.
So here's something that I've heard from a lot of Democrats and very good election analysts, which seems to be in some tension here. There is an argument that what happened to Democrats between 2020 and 2024 is their voters stayed home. And so what happened here was a shrinking of the electorate that disproportionately sliced off what Democrats for a while were calling the anti-MAGA coalition. How does that idea that Democrats didn't lose to Trump, they lost to the couch, sit with you?
It's just not empirically correct, I would say. Generally, turnout and support go in the same direction for the basic reason that there are a lot of people who didn't feel ready to vote for a Republican, but were still mad at the Democratic Party, and so they stayed home in response. And if you just look at the demographics of who these people are who voted for Biden last time and stayed home this time, they're generally low education, they're fairly politically disengaged, they're much less likely to watch shows like MSNBC and more likely to watch shows like Fox, and they frankly just look a lot like the voters who trended away from us.
So if you had forced them out to vote, they may have just voted for Donald Trump.
Right, exactly. And that does show up. If you look at African Americans, for example, African Americans who didn't vote were much more likely to say that they supported Trump than the ones that did this cycle. It's true that overall turnout fell in a lot of the country, but in the battleground states that actually decided the presidential election, turnout was roughly where it was from 4 years ago. And it just is clear as day that that a bunch of people changed their mind.
How much is this just inflation? You are dealing with people who they're not paying a lot of attention to politics. They do pay attention and feel prices and the state of the country. You had a massive inflationary period, and they're pissed. And being pissed about inflation moved them against the incumbent party, which they held responsible in this country as in other countries for inflation.
I think that that's a very reasonable explanation. It makes sense that the people who care the least about politics are going to be the most mad about prices going up. And there's a lot of academic reasons to think that makes sense. I'm not making any claims, per se about why this happened, though I think inflation makes sense. If you actually poll these non-voters and, ask them, what did they care the most about? They'll tell you.
I bet that I bet this probably tracks even more with the other categories given as well. Probably like the more educated you are, the more you're earning, the less likely you are to be impacted by inflation, the more likely you are to vote Democrat. The poorer you are, probably the more likely you were to be negatively impacted by inflation. The less money you have to spend, the less money you earn, the more likely you are to vote for Trump. It probably tracks along those lines as well, I would guess.
Though I think inflation makes sense. If you actually poll these non-voters and, ask them, what did they care the most about? They'll tell you inflation. I'll get to this later, but that's what every single subgroup of the electorate cared the most about by overwhelming margins. And so I don't think it's necessarily true that it's impossible for us to win those voters back. But, I'll talk about this later. There have been dramatic shifts in the media consumption habits of these people in the last 4 years. And so it may be a harder problem.
Before we discuss this, I think it's worth talking through the next chart too, because it's getting at the same question in a different way.
So here, we have a plot that we just took from The Economist. And in the bottom, we just have foreign-born population. And on the top, we just have increase in Republican vote share. And, what you can see is there's a very clear correlation.
This is by county.
This is by county. There's a
point change in Republican vote share, 2020 to 2024. Irish, Italian, or Polish ancestry.
very clear correlation between how many immigrants there were in a county and how much it increased by Donald Trump, towards Trump. You can see in counties like, Queens, New York, or Miami-Dade in Florida, Trump increased his vote share percentage by 10 percentage points, which is just crazy. And so when we go and we look at the precinct election results, what we see is that in immigrant communities of all races, our best guess is that immigrants went from being a Biden plus 27 group in 2020 to a group that Trump narrowly won in 2024. This group, of naturalized citizens is roughly 10% of the electorate.
So that means that immigrants swung much, much, much more than the median of the electorate.
That's exactly.
It's also funny too, because this, in a way, I don't know if it would map on directly, but in a way, this kind of tracks with the arguments about proclivity to commit crime, right? That people will say that there are a lot of immigrants are more predisposed to crime than the native-born citizens. Now, there are reasons that, the Cato Institute does a lot on this, that a lot of it has to do with, for instance, age and demographics. So, of course, immigrants are going to commit more crime than natives in general when you don't adjust for age, because immigrants typically immigrate in their prime crime-committing years, right? That if your average age of an immigrant, especially an illegal immigrant, is in the 20s, well, of course, they're going to have a higher proclivity for crime than your median aged population or mean age population that's in their 40s or 50s, because 60, 70, 80-year-old people don't tend to commit crime. But there's that return to the mean of the children of immigrants tend to commit more crime than the immigrants themselves. And one reading of that is that immigrants produce crime as a result of, their children hate America or whatever. But the second way to read that is if you compare it to native crime rates, they're just approaching the mean of, they're becoming true Americans, and their crime rates are now catching up to that. And it's kind of funny to imagine the voting stuff is similar. And that why are they starting to go for Trump, or why are they becoming more Republican? Well, they're just becoming more American because they've been here for a long time. Their families have been here for a long time. And now the difference in demographics and which parties support are just starting to more closely mirror native-born American citizens, which is funny.
Exactly right. Our estimates.
How can anyone explain that 27-point shift? That's insane. I don't know if he'll get into the data on it. I'm actually really curious to hear it. My bullshit vibe feeling on it was just that I think Republicans basically wrote off minority voters and just assumed that they could never win with them. Maybe. I don't know. Charlie Kirk didn't talk about that, I don't think. But instead, Republican messaging just broadened to, what do working class, real Americans think? And they just focused on that, while progressives, again, I love you guys so much, but regardless of how you feel, it feels like pandering. When progressives are talking about minorities, it feels like they're talking about retarded children, the same way they treat women, ironically enough. That messaging is probably just not very effective. And when you run into a group that just wants to speak to ordinary American problems, I imagine an ordinary black working man or an ordinary black working family probably cares more about things like inflation or working opportunities or conditions more than reparations or white supremacy or Western colonialism or whatever kind of the trendy progressive issues are to talk about, or more than like my guess is the average black person, the average Hispanic person probably didn't care that much that Iron Man was white, you know, or that Cleopatra was represented by an African American as opposed to a Mediterranean. Like they probably don't care as much. Like these are battles that progressives are having for nobody. It reminds me of this a lot.
That movie should have been 10 minutes long. They literally should have got to the casino and just blown the security guards. They're crazy bitches. That's all they make. They either make that or they make slavery movies every year. Those are for no one. I have black friends. I was like, dude, you guys like these? They're like, no, we thought these were for you. It's like, no. We all hate those. Stop making them. It's uncomfortable. Civil rights movies are good though. I like
it just feels like the Latinx thing. Like who is this for? Who is Latinx for? It's not for Hispanic people, right? I don't know who is that word made for? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Immigrants swung much, much, much more than the median of the electorate.
That's exactly so my guess, my vibe guess is basically Republicans are like, okay, well, fuck minorities. We're just going to forget trying to signal to them. And in doing so, in just like signaling to a general electorate and treating everybody kind of like a human, I think they end up having a stronger message than they would have otherwise, which I think is kind of funny, but...
You're right. Our estimates, it's really hard to know exactly what happened. It turns out that working class immigrants do not answer a ton of surveys, but our best guess is that they swung 23 percentage points against the Democratic Party. And so the crazy thing is if you believe this, I mean, there's some uncertainty, but I think some version of this is probably true, then something like half of the net votes that Trump received came from immigrants. And, this wasn't efficient for him. It's one of the big reasons, why the bias of the Electoral College went down by so much this cycle. Because if you look in the battleground states, things swung toward Trump maybe by like half a percentage point, and that was enough for him to win, or, 1 percentage point. But if you look at like the 4 biggest states where immigrants are concentrated, New York, California, Texas, Trump did extremely well. And so it wasn't very efficient for him, but in terms of people changing their mind, it was a massive percentage of the story.
So this gets to another way that I think the data has proven conventional wisdom from at least 2020 wrong. So 2020, you have an election that Joe Biden wins. He wins by...
Wait. Hassan does it all the time when he has a black person on his stream. Guaranteed at some point he's going to say as a black person. Yeah, but the problem is the black people and the Hispanic people on Hassan's stream, these aren't like ordinary black and Hispanic people. These are white black and Hispanic people, because all of the Hispanic and black people that Hassan is going to bring on his stream are going to be like fucking socialists who are going to tell you how, actually, let me tell you how MLK, even though he actually explicitly denounced socialism, let me tell you how MLK and all these people were actually black socialists, and socialism is actually a huge black movement thing, and Hispanic people actually love socialism, and let me tell you all about it. And like, these people represent a very, very small slice, a sliver of the actual ethnic minorities in the United States of America. Most Hispanic people do not like socialism. Most people who came from South America do not like socialism. Most black people don't give a fuck about whatever Black Panther, hardcore socialist communist. These are like college kids, okay? These are not representative views. That's like when he brings up Jews for peace or whatever. It's like, oh, look, there are a lot of Jews that are opposed to Israel's existence. Like, bro, come on.
Has proven conventional wisdom from at least 2020 wrong. So 2020, you have an election that...
Yes and no for black issues. The justice system being racist in particular is very big for my community. Yeah, but the justice system being racist, I think, is a lot different than speaking about like Western colonialism or the more broad abstract academic concepts of those issues, I think.
A way that I think the data has proven conventional wisdom from at least 2020 wrong. So 2020, you have an election that Joe Biden wins. He wins by less than the polling says he will win by. And one reason he wins by less than the polling says he will win by is that Donald Trump is much better with Hispanic and Asian voters than he was expected to. And I remember seeing pretty strong research afterwards and talking to people who study the Hispanic vote, who were saying, well, in 2020, the pandemic really scrambled what the election was about. So in 2016, the election was about immigration. In 2020, it was about the pandemic. It was about lockdowns. It was about the economy. And so Hispanic voters who were driven off of Trump by his border talk in 2016 were more likely to vote for him in 2020. But that was weird, right? It was the pandemic in a way moderating Donald Trump's appeal. 2024, Trump runs, I would say, to the right of where he was on the border in 2016, right? We're talking mass deportations. We're talking more than a wall. And Trump does better among immigrant groups than he really ever has before. So the Democratic belief that when the topic turned back to immigration, you would see some of that polarization around Trump return and that he would be harmed in immigrant communities did not occur.
No. Inflation probably
What's going on there?
Played some kind of role here. Though, the flip side is if you look in the UK, it happened the same year. It's just that the incumbent was right-wing instead of left-wing. And, their labor did also, drop with, black and Asian and Hindu voters. And so I think that there's some kind of globalized right-wing phenomena that's happening. It's hard to know exactly what, but I agree completely. Now just move on.
Oh, damn. I think David Shore like is hardcore into the numbers analysis. So he's probably not looking to opine on or guess like, oh, well, what actually happened here? He just kind of like follows the numbers. Not that that's bad or anything. I'm just saying he's probably not going to, hi, baby, venture a guess as to why things are changing if he can't show it directly in the polling data. What's up? How you doing? Hi, baby.
And to the next slide. Here we have Harris support by single age year, by race and gender.
I found this chart a little hard to read. So can you describe to me what's happening here?
Single age year, by race and gender.
I found this chart a little hard to read. So can you describe to me what's happening here?
Sure. So we have 4 lines.
2024 Democratic support by age. People of color, men, POC women, white men, white women. Gap in 2022 support between women and men. Oh. Okay, I think. Wait. Oh, never mind. Okay. I thought this was more complicated than it was. So this is saying that between women and men. Never mind. I can't read this. The fuck? It looks like this is how women supported the Democratic Party, and this is how men supported the Democratic Party. But that's not it. Oh no, it's the difference between... No, I don't know what this is. Never mind. Fuck it.
It's on this chart. And the x-axis...
Hard to read. So can you describe to me what's happening here?
Sure. So we have 4 lines on this chart, and the x-axis is age, and the y-axis is our estimate for what fraction of people in that group voted for Kamala Harris in 2024. And
oh, okay. Why? I thought this was... I just assumed that this x-axis was by year, like the year they voted. Okay, I see.
And we have a light blue line for women of color. We have a dark blue dash line for men of color. We have like a light pink solid line for white women, and then a dash line for white men. And one of the things you can see here is if you just look at 18-year-olds, 18-year-old women of color are the only of the 4 that actually, voted, that Harris won. Trump narrowly won, non-white men.
So I do find this part of this chart shocking. I sometimes talk about narrative violations, and I think if we knew anything about Donald Trump 8 years ago, it's that young people did not like him.
Wait, watch Josiah's live stream. Is something going on? Fuck. Wait, what is his... Does he stream on Twitch?
Washington police.
Oh, they're just doing their podcast. Why do you... What am I watching this for? Oh boy, Fabian. Debating him in 7 minutes. Oh boy.
Right. And Republicans are maybe throwing away young people for generations in order to run up their margins among seniors. But if you look at this chart among white men who are 75 years old, supported Kamala Harris at a significantly higher rate than white men who are 20 years old.
That's exactly right.
That's a real shift.
It is a real shift. This is the...
Oh, I see. Okay.
The thing I am the most shocked by, I think, in the last 4 years is that young people have gone from being the most progressive generation since the baby boomers, and maybe in some ways more so, to becoming potentially the most conservative, generation that we've experienced, maybe in 50 to 60 years. And so, the next chart, just to describe
this chart in some ways convinced me to do this podcast.
Oh, thank you.
This chart shocks me.
I agree. This is, to me, the scariest chart in this entire presentation. And again, something I'm very surprised by. On the bottom, we have age. And at the top, we have the gender gap in support between women and men. And, for support for Kamala Harris. And so what you can see is that...
I feel like this is going to be really annoying. Wait, let me see this last chart again. Chill. So you have your white men down here. Way the fuck down here. Meow. What? Why are you being so weird? Can you not hear him meowing in the background? So you have your white men all the way down there, okay, very low support. Now you have gender gap. I think that the demonization of like white young men, I think really hurt. Don't you dare. If you stop. Why? Look, sit here. Here. Get back here. Look. Sit here and be happy. You don't have to go up there. Just sit right here. Look. You have your own chair. You can just chill right here. Just chill. Whatever, okay. He's gonna go and claw my shit up. I know he is. When all those DNC candidates couldn't answer that white men question, trigger the fuck out of me. Hi. What? He wants attention, and as soon as I start giving it to him, he's gonna go scratch my shit up. I know he is. Okay.
We have the gender gap in support between women and men, and for support for Kamala Harris. And so what you can see is that for voters over 30, the gender gap was fairly stable at around 10%, which is roughly where it's been in American politics.
And voters over 75, it's even lower.
That's right.
It's a fairly low gender gap among older voters.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people underestimate how recent the gender gap is. Historically, Republicans did better with women than men, and this was true across most of the West. That center-left parties did better with men than women, and that's changed in the United States in the Clinton era. But it's been stable since then. But what's crazy is if you look at people who are under the age of 30, the gender gap has exploded. If you look at 18-year-olds, 18-year-old men were 23 percentage points more likely to support Donald Trump than 18-year-old women, which is just completely unprecedented in American politics.
Is that abortion?
I think it's too early to say exactly what the cause is. What's interesting is that this is happening.
Cultural stuff. Big deal. That red pill shit was really effective.
In other countries as well. Obviously, different countries have different political systems, but I've seen similar patterns in Canada, in the UK, in Norway. There's a lot of research, to do here, but it's still very striking. A lot of people talk about the Democratic young men problem, and I think it's still somehow underrated because the actual numbers are just a lot worse than people think.
The huge gender gap implies to me it's not just inflation. Women pay high prices for eggs too.
Right. And I'll say, if you look at the UK election last year, the Labour Party did a lot better, because the incumbent party was unpopular. But I think what's interesting is that if you look at it by age, the Conservatives actually increased their vote share among 18 to 24-year-old voters, I think by 2 or 3%, even though they only did, even though they did 8 or 9% worse overall. And so I do think it's not just inflation, it's not just backlash to the incumbent governments, though I'm sure that's part of the story too.
I feel like the story you're implying that you believe here is that this is polarization among young men and women driven by men who are in high school, who are young, who are online, particularly online during COVID, as Me Too is cresting. At the time of, as Jordan Peterson is a big figure, Andrew Tate is rising.
Ben Shapiro,
you have what now it's called the manosphere.
Actually, I shouldn't even include Ben Shapiro there. It would be your Jordan Peterson and then your red pill people. Yeah.
But there is a sense the Democratic Party is becoming much more pro-women party, and in some ways sort of anti-young men, and that just had a huge effect on young men's political opinions.
Well, I do want to just stress that this seems to be a global phenomena. And, I don't want to over-center the particular things the Democratic Party has done rather than, the broader cultural...
Peterson and Tate are global figures.
No, exactly. I agree.
Yeah, I think another thing I was just going to say that. Another thing you have to be careful of, too, is global it's becoming less and less a thing. There still is a whole planet that's different, but in a lot of ways, we're a lot more connected than we ever were before, to where a lot of these political figures or a lot of these social figures are viewed by everybody, right? The Tates and the Red Pill movement was not just a U.S. thing. Even if it was the loudest in the United States, which I don't even know if that's true, but even if it was the loudest in the United States, this was a global phenomenon because all of our social media is global, right? Look at how much Elon Musk is trying to influence what's going on with Marie Le Pen or AfD in Germany or South African politics, and the United Kingdom. Like all of these places are all consuming very similar content, and it's important to be aware of that.
Agree with that. What I'll say is I just think that, we're in the midst of a big cultural change that I think that, people are really underestimating. If you look at Zoomers, I don't have slides on this, but there's just a lot of really interesting ways that they're very different in the data. They're much more likely than previous generations to say that making money is extremely important to them. They are a lot more, if you look at their...
I will say, I don't know if that one poll was true or not. Was this all Zoomers? I don't think it was just women, right? I think it was all Zoomers. They were asked, what do you think is a wealthy wage? And it was I thought boomers said 100K, and Gen X said 110K, and millennials said 105K, and I think Zoomers said 650K. What? Was that poll real? That was retarded. That was an insane poll. If it was real, and I'm not just thinking of some fucking poll. Oh shit, it's 8 o'clock. Oh. Influencer culture is warping everything. Yeah, I think so to some extent. Yeah. Somebody linked me that poll. I'm curious if that was a real thing or if I was just repeating dumb shit that I've just seen on Twitter or whatever. Rich is anyone that can afford the Pokemon cookies without worrying. True.